our partner perspective or our friend or our child or family member, not communication style, which we just talked about, but their template for the world, their vision of the world. For example, if somebody was born in a happy family, they were really, really loved, they were given all love and affection in the way that was appropriate to them. So, for example, if they were kinesthetic, they were touched a lot and hugged a lot by their parents. If they're auditory, they were talked to a lot by their parents and so on. So they grew up being a balanced human being, and they can feel that their needs have been met all the way. And so because they experienced it in childhood, this is something that they naturally expect from people. And this is something that actually they naturally give to people as well, because they approach people with the same attitude. They basically take this sort of mold they had in childhood and they apply it to any relationship. Well, of course, there is a chance always that this person can attract somebody who is really different, and this is why they need them, because this is something very healing for them. But the likelihood is that such a person will find a way of communication, or at least they will recognize that their partner or the person they communicated with have a problem, and they will be working on that. They won't just automatically blame the other person, or they won't automatically feel guilty themselves for miscommunication. So this is a positive, nice scenario. Imagine a different scenario. Somebody with a difficult childhood, they're used to things go badly for them. They're used to their needs not being met. They're used to fighting for survival. And this is something that they take from their childhood. And with these filters for the external world, they will start forming their relationships. How much success do you feel we have in this case? Not a lot, unless the person consciously wants to grow out of it. They understand their problem, and they are actually given appropriate ways to deal with it. They are being helped by somebody, as a friend, a therapist. Sometimes what happened with, for example, when there was not a terrible childhood, but when there was a little bit of neglect, which can really be damaging for a child, situational neglect. Parents worked a lot. And then suddenly the child is 20, mom is retired, and mom is saying, come on, let's talk. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If you're dealing with somebody like that, you really need to understand that it will take a lot for them to open up, because for them opening up would mean disappointment. Sometimes it could mean outward danger, depending on how severe their childhood situation. So it doesn't mean that relationships are completely doomed because they're going to carry these patterns for their entire life. Not at all. If they are aware of this, if they really want to develop good relationship, if you're prepared to help, then not necessarily you as a partner, for example, need to play a therapist role. Not necessarily, because for some relationship it works, but I would say that for majority it wouldn't, because for that, at the very least, you need to have some kind of training as a therapist to play this role for your partner. Otherwise, it will be a total mess and you end up in an entanglement which will benefit no one. If you help them with being patient, with listening to them, with the softness of your behavior, so they drop their guard and they will gradually open up. So I think there are several keys here. I want to start from the very end. So imagine you're successful with your approach. They feel understood. They feel that their needs being met. But imagine if in a process, especially we're talking about relationship which is the beginning stage, when you're not sure if you're going to stay with this person, and if communication is pretty much the only issue, then what can happen? You put all these efforts, they will work, and then you will realize that this person is not for you. This could be a major disappointment and major trauma actually for your potential partner, because relationship didn't work out and what they see, there was a promise, but their needs were not met. So you need to see on which stage of commitment to this particular relationship you are. If you're not committed to this particular person, to this particular relationship, I suggest you don't use these techniques. So there are only two tools. The first one is patience and observations. And that sounds really, really boring. But imagine that you're more proactive type and they tend to keep their emotions and feeling to themselves and they're really difficult to open up. Your natural impulse will be to go for it, to talk, to really shake them if you wish. and to engage them in conversation. And their natural response would be to be slow and opening up. So patience means that every time you want to blame them, every time you want things to go quicker than they are naturally developing, you stop, you take a deep breath, and you remind yourself that you're dealing with somebody who you really, really like, or you really, really love, and you're committed to this person. But from time to time, they're going into this child mode because, and this shows in communication. And this is where you need to be patient, because what it is, when we are children and we don't receive love and care appropriate to our age, or something happens, God forbid, some trauma at a particular stage of development, what happens? We freeze. There is a part of our soul that freezes at this point. And what happens that any stress, including relationship, including communication stress, including this type of stress, any misunderstanding in relationship, it triggers this response, and they automatically go into this childhood behavior, and more often it will be withdrawal, it could be outward aggression, or whatever it is, depending on their temperament, depending on their situation. What you want to help them gently to grow out of it. And it might seem that here you're playing a role of a parent. You don't. Nobody is perfect. We all have our little things. We all had this instance in childhood which caused us to freeze at a particular stage of development. So we ourselves often have these hang-ups as well. And I'm not only talking about psychological traumas. Interestingly, and this is something that we don't really pay attention to very often, any major childhood disease, any operation can really stunt the development. This is something that's not widely known. You had this massive flu with a high temperature, but then you recovered, you're alive. Did you notice, if you're a parent, that after this instances, the child is not the same? They're just not the same. So for example, they had severe flu, and before that they were eating everything, they were happy, they didn't get any colds necessarily, and after that, things just go totally, totally different. It's almost like there is this something was left with this fever of this flu, or something was left with that tonsillectomy operation. So this is something that we need to remember. So anything that happens in childhood, psychological trauma, physical trauma, can stunt the growth, can stunt the development. And our job here in relationship is to understand that our partner has this set of a problem. For example, they're 3 years old when something happened, and if there is a stress in communications, they revert to being 3 years old. And you have your problem when you're 9, and you resort to your 9 years old version when there is a trigger and problem and stress in communication. And so what happens when you actually start arguing? That is, this is 3 years old talking to this 9 years old, and this is not good. Being aware of this means accept that this exists. We are prepared to be patient. We take a nice deep breath and just observe. In this situation, we need to observe. And we also need to remember that what is the difference between so-so relationship and committed relationship is that we are willing to work on relationship. We are willing to go somewhere together. So there is an agreement. We help them, they help us. It's not necessarily that should go into parent or therapist role. If you froze on a later stage than they did, it just means that, for example, if they froze at 3, they're operating on levels of feelings, they would feel a lot because this is a feeling stage of development of a child. And 9 years old, this is a logic, discernment between good and bad and right or wrong. This is totally different, but they are both vulnerable stages. So patience and observation. So just step back. If something is developing which you don't like, just step back and observe what is actually happening. Which version of them talking to which version of you? Life changing if you just do this.